And all of a sudden I see my room light up. My eyes are closed. This is all happening behind closed eyes. My room lights up and I can see like 20 orbs in my room. And it absolutely took my breath away. And I felt two hands rest on my head.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of Soul Inspired. I'm really excited to have Raiya Iverson with us tonight. She is a doula, and we're going to talk about some spiritual experiences that she's had over time. So, first of all, thanks so much, Raiya, for coming on the show tonight. I normally, as many people have been listening to my podcast at this point, they all know I start with a very common themed question. And if you look at where you are and who you are and the things that you do in your life right now, sometimes people will find there's kind of this shift that happens in their life. There's an experience or there's a moment in time where things kind of shifted for them. Sometimes it is childhood, sometimes it's at different points in their life. But would you be able to tell us a little bit about your experience and if there was a moment or an event in your life that moved you in this direction?
Oh, I really think that I've been on a lifelong journey.
Okay.
Yeah, as I have gone through, I think I've been on an actual spiritual journey for probably about 20 years. And as I've gone through, I can see how my journey started even before I was born and into my ancestors. And so yeah, it's been a long process. I think it's not just one thing. It's an accumulation of a lot of things that has brought me here. So
Right. So there wasn't a specific event in your life. There was nothing that really changed things. You felt like this was a lifelong journey. I feel that way too. If I'm, being honest with you, I feel like I've had that. There were a few things in my life that kind of shifted some focus and maybe go down a spiritual path. But I feel like I was always that kid that was wondering about things and felt a little different. So I probably can relate to that. So now, from what I understand, you are now currently you're a doula. So would you be able to tell us a little bit more about what you do in your work, like what kind of work you do?
that also is something that has shifted over time. I kind of started out. Technically, I started out as a mother. I was a mom of five small kids. I was a young mom too, and it wasn't until I divorced at 30 years old and started kind of getting into the workforce. Yeah, I started getting into medicine, like wanting to work in the hospital systems. Um, that took a shift many years into it, more into a holistic path for me. And I left the hospital system because I wanted, just to be able to have a little bit more hands on, a little bit more spirituality involved in the way that I'm able to care for people. And that took me on the path of a birth doula. But at the time, I was also working at the cancer hospital. And so I was witnessing a lot of end of life. And I, I was doing some birth doula stuff. And as I was working in the cancer, I was having these epiphanies like, I need to bring this into the death world. And kind of moved that over and spent a lot of years as a death doula and wrote my own program to teach others to help care for the dying as well. And so that's kind of where a lot of it was for a lot of years. And just recently, within the last few years, life has called me back to the birth side of things, and now I'm doing midwifery. So
Oh, wow. So you've kind of shifted back and forth between the two cycles of life, between
yeah,
our
I've kind
exit
of
and our entry.
I bookend this life experience. So
That's interesting. Now, if just to clarify, you mentioned that you worked in hospitals and you worked with medicine. Are you talking about being a nurse or were
that's the goal. I
okay.
was I was headed towards nursing, and honestly, the closer I got to that goal, the more anxiety I was feeling over it, and just like I don't want to be a nurse, I don't want to push meds and chart my whole life. That doesn't sound like a good life because, my gift to this world is taking care of people and I don't know. Maybe
Okay.
it was just the nurses I was working with, but it just didn't look like something I really wanted to do. So,
No, I think nursing does take a certain person, and I think that it's it's a we need nurses, definitely. But I can see there are quite a few people who get out of it through burnout and all kinds of different reasons. It's not the easiest path, that is for sure. So I can understand that.
mhm.
You mentioned epiphanies. Could you elaborate a little bit what you mean by that? You had epiphanies while you're working at the cancer center, or was it somewhere else?
Yeah, no, they started, yeah, working with cancer patients. You want to be humbled by your own life experience, work with cancer. And um, I don't know, it's the epiphany that I had was that I needed to bring doula work into the death side of things. When I had that epiphany, I didn't realize that it was actually a thing out there. I did some research, wanted to be a death doula. I had experience in it. I was good at it. Death didn't scare me. I had a very natural ability to hold that kind of space for people during that transition. Um, but I was still raising kids at the time. And so I couldn't go off to a training somewhere. And so that's why I just kind of spent like 3 years, I think, writing my own program so that I could not just do it, but also teach it to others that might want to learn it as well. So
You mentioned you had no fear of death, or your fear of death had gone, or you didn't mind death, or it just didn't bother you.
bother me, like I feel, I don't know, holding the hands of the dying and their loved ones, it just came naturally to me. I'm not afraid of that process. I'm not afraid for myself. Um, what will happen after death. I think that I know that there's some very beautiful things waiting on the other side. And yeah, it just didn't scare me at all. And so it was easy to be able to share that space with somebody who was experiencing it and hold it for them. Um,
Did you experience death in your life at all? Was there anything that led you into having that? Because I mean, some people have a massive fear of anxiety over death. It's that unknown, right? We're not meant to really know while we're here. So there's this unknown, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety around it. So I'm curious, did you have people you had lost?
Um, no, other than patients and some friends as a teenager, I hadn't experienced a whole lot of death. A couple of grandparents as I was a little bit older in life. But working in cancer, that's kind of when I got really exposed to it, was watching people die in the cancer hospital.
Okay.
And um, I don't know. I just think that I've been one of these people my whole life that um, I'm a deep thinker and a deep feeler, and I just have always kind of known that there's something bigger than this.
Right.
Like this life is about this much of what's actually happening, right? And I've
Yeah.
always felt it. I think I always have felt very close to, I call them angels. I call them my spirit tribe. Um, but there is this whole facet that I have always felt very connected to and have had very deep experiences with it, just within the last 5 to 10 years, being able to like see them and feel them and
Wow.
be around them. Yeah. So,
That's
um,
interesting.
yeah. And it didn't happen
Yeah.
when I was working in the cancer hospital. That was just mostly like an internal knowing for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just have always kind of had a knack for being able to be around it and it doesn't scare me away. I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
A lot
Well,
of
that
times when people are dying, people are, they don't want to be touched, they don't want to touch people. They don't want to be around people. They don't want to talk about death. It's taboo. It scares them. And I'm the kind of person that's like, let's sit down and talk about death, you know,
Yeah.
have a conversation.
That's interesting. So you weren't really having extreme spiritual experiences while you were working with those people. It sounds like you were just there for support, comfort, and to be with them by their side during
Yeah.
their last moments here on earth. And so um the knowing that you say, I always go into these funny moments in some of the episodes where I get talking about purpose and what we're doing. And, I'm like looking at my suit that I'm wearing, this human body, and I'll start going off in these tangents. And I'll say, do you ever wonder why you get up and you eat your food and then you go to your job and you come home and then you're like, well, what are we doing? Like, why? Like, what are we doing? And then the more whys you start asking, it kind of starts to make you feel like you're going a little mad, because you say to yourself, what are we doing? Right. And I think there's just a lot of people in this world that are on a treadmill and they're not asking those questions. Maybe
Hmm.
some people aren't meant to ask the questions, and that's fine. But I think it's important to ask the questions because all kinds of things are going to happen in your life, right? You're
Yeah.
going to have people around you that pass. You're going to have friends, family, yourself at some point. It's like it's something we're all meant to do. But I get into this headspace, and that's what kind of led me into it. I was a young kid and I saw this movie, and in the movie somebody died. It really didn't matter, but in that moment I went, wait, what do you mean they're gone? Like what is that? And so there was fear around that, and
Hmm.
it just kind of led me into a whole years and years of seeking.
Yeah.
But those conversations that are probably very personal that you've had with those people who were in their last days, and that inner knowing that you had, was that comforting to them?
I think so. It's not something that I promoted to them in those moments. I just held their hand and listened to their stories and made, I was their witness. I was the
Mhm.
witness to the process without judgment. I wasn't there to try to fix anything for them. I wasn't there to try to talk them about, out of being afraid themselves, or, sometimes it was like just being able to have a conversation with them that they couldn't have with their own family members.
Right.
you know Sometimes the dying can't talk to their family members about their own fears because they're the ones that are dying, but they're spending so much time taking care of the emotional status of their family
Of
members who
them.
are experiencing it. Yeah. So
I can understand
um
that.
yeah, just being able to hold that space as a witness to their process, and not, I mean, that's the job of a death doula, is you're not there to change anything for them. This is what's happening.
Right.
So honor the process and make it as beautiful as possible. So
Now, you've said that you worked in that field, you worked with people who were in the dying stages of life. Some of them may have had experiences themselves, and there was probably personal conversations you had with them, maybe not around that, but um what experiences happened in your life? Like what was it that started changing or shifting after some time? Like I guess you said it was after you had stopped working in that area.
yeah,
And okay, so would you be able to share any experiences like that, or?
I would love to. um, yeah. So my life on a less professional level and more personal level has been pretty rocky. Um, Started out as a young kid with some abuse in my life, and that carried on into relationships uh, later in life. And I found myself a single mom of 5 kids at 30 years old. That's a definite eye opener on how little you actually know about yourself. Um, and so it was 17 years it took me to really like come into a place where I'm at now, where I'm just like, everything makes sense.
Wow.
Um, you know, when I left a marriage, I had a lot of relationships, right? And they weren't what you would say are good.
Hmm.
Um, but the last relationship that I had was, it was so hard. It was with a man that had bipolar disorder, and that created a lot of rift in my family. And, um, but oh my gosh, I left that relationship with so much love. Um, so in that 17 years, being, I left the first husband with a lot of animosity and, you know, the fighting and the whole, like, the way my parents did it. I kind of mimicked the way my parents did it, right?
Right.
And 17 years later, I left a relationship that I just was able to do it with so much love. And it was still very painful. It was probably more painful than any of the others. But there was so much love for him, and kind of like, we need to go to our corners. And there was so much love for myself, which had never happened before. And it was a couple of years before this when I really started having these moments of awakening for myself. Um, I think I kind of mentioned seeing angels, talking to angels, feeling the angels. Um, and so when I left that relationship, honestly, it is what carried me through that, the just profound loss that I was experiencing.
Hmm.
That was back in 2021. Um, and I don't know, it's loss, but I don't, and I go through moments where I still grieve it. Um, but it's not grief in the way where it could cripple somebody
Hmm.
anymore, where it used to cripple me.
Right.
Um, I just keep coming back to this really beautiful place that I was taught by whatever's on the other side.
That's amazing. So you had the one marriage where you had five children with
Mm.
that ended. Then you had other relationships, and there was one longer one. It seems like
Yeah, the
that
last one was
the
eight
last one,
years. Hmm.
and then that one ended, and that was 2021, which isn't that long ago. And it was from that point on that these experiences started to happen. I'm sorry, or was it prior to
They
that?
started to happen in when I was in the middle of that relationship.
Okay.
I actually met my angel. I think it was probably about 2018 was when
Okay.
I first like had this really amazing experience where it was shown to me that I'm not alone in this life. I'm never walking alone.
Right.
None of us are ever walking alone. And I don't know. I kind of the way it happened was I was at work one day, came home with a migraine, so I came home a little bit early, and I had um, laid down, tried to sleep, and this dog started barking, and I was so annoyed. And I'd remembered this story that my older sister had told me about. You have angels. When you talk to them, they don't need a bunch of fluff. Like, can you please? No, just tell them what you need and then say thank you. And so that's what I did. I was like, please go tell the dog it needs to be quiet. I need to check out for 30 minutes. Thank you. Well, it didn't happen, right? And so my immediate response was, I guess I don't have angels. And then I remembered there was an earplug in the nightstand. So I plugged an ear and I finally crashed out and got up, did my night with my kids, went to bed that night. All of my experiences happen in a dream state. Um, it's in when I'm not quite into dream yet, but like I'm aware of where I'm at, but the mind is just flowing. I'm like in theta, you
Kind of
know.
that in between mode as you're falling asleep into. I've heard of this. I've heard of that being the area that you want to try to get into because um it keeps you you're still conscious of, of your surroundings a little bit at times, right?
Is gone. Your
But
ego's
which,
no longer,
yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
yeah. So
Mm,
that's where all of my experiences started happening. And this night I went to bed and I I was trying to sleep. I knew I was in my bed trying to sleep, but my mind is flowing. I'm not attaching to anything. And all of a sudden I see my room light up. My eyes are closed. This is all happening behind closed eyes. My room lights up and I can see like 20 orbs in my room. And it absolutely took my breath away. And I felt two hands rest on my head.
mm,
And I just went, is this real? And those hands nodded my head to tell me yes. And it's hard to say I was weeping because my body wasn't weeping, but my soul just cried. And it was just like, thank you. Um, and I think it's a little unfortunate that I had to call the angels out. Like, I guess I don't have angels,
mm-hmm.
but they came and showed me, yes, you do. You're fine, and it's been since that moment when, I mean, that opened up something in me to have so many experiences between then and now.
Wow. Yeah, it's almost like a door opened. It
Yeah,
sounds like a door opened, your reality shifted, and you were okay with it. And I think that's a big piece. I think from talking to people over the years and now with this podcast, um, there are moments where a lot of us are faced with something that we can't explain. And the way that we react to that can really impact the rest of the story, if you will. Because if if you're sitting there and your great uh Aunt Martha shows up and you run down the street, she's probably not coming
yes,
back.
yeah,
No one's
yeah,
going to come back because that's not what that's not the purpose of it. But I think if you can accept it with love,
hmm,
it likely changes a few things. The other thing is, it's great that we have a life now where we can have platforms like this and we can bring these stories to life that at
yeah,
one point we would all have been seen like we were crazy and been locked up because of it. But the world is shifting and it's shifting quick, and more people are noticing these things and realizing them and treating them in a different light.
hmm, yeah. I think that has a lot to do. I mean, not to be too cliche with the verbiage or anything, but the vibration of people in general, we're starting to raise it, right? We're starting to eat better. We're starting to think on a more conscious level of what's healthy and what's unhealthy. And, healing from our traumas has become like a really big thing, talking about mental wellness. And, that's something our parents didn't talk about. They just kind of sucked it up. That was the way to do it. And so it's becoming a little bit more mainstream to take care of ourselves, give ourselves self love. And so that's raising the vibration within ourselves and allowing high vibrational beings to come in and say, hey, we're here.
Mm-hmm. These orbs you see, right? Do you see them often now? Can you still see them, or do they come just at moments in your life when you need to see them or when you call to them?
I haven't seen orbs after that. I've
Okay.
seen bodies of light. I've seen and been, I've had two experiences where I was just literally hanging out with my angels all night,
Wow.
asking questions, getting answers, so excited, and seeing that there's all these moving pieces to my life, and how in order to solve certain issues that I'm having, they have 20 things have to happen first, and I'm watching this immaculate chessboard that they're playing with of my life, putting things into place for me.
Mm.
But of course, when I woke up, all of the details were gone, and the only message I came home with was, "There's a lot of moving pieces. You need to be patient." And that happened two different times last year.
So you had actual conversations, whether it was, it sounds a lot like the people I speak with who have near death experiences, and in a sense, a lot of times it's like a telekinesis type thing, or is that what we call it, or telepathic, not telekinesis, telepathic. where you're speaking, but it's just
You're not
known.
talking. Yes.
Right. So you,
I feel it come through so I don't, this is the right side. It comes in from the back on the right side of my head. That's where I hear information come in to the center of my mind.
hmm
It's, yeah, it's interesting, but
so
that's where it
so
comes in for me.
so that comes in, but you're saying that you had these experiences, but then once you woke later, you don't remember a lot. Because one of the as soon as you said you had a conversation, I'm like, oh, let's find out all the juicy details of what yeah, so they're gone.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
wasn't meant to know any of that. They don't want me to
right,
know that. What's the fun of this life if I know what's going to happen, right?
right.
And that doesn't allow me to learn what I need to learn along the way if I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically it was kind of like just them, I think twice, just saying, look at what we're doing for you. We're working hard. You got to be patient.
So do you think, and I love all that. Thank you for sharing all that. The question I would ask is, you mentioned the thing that you came back with, and this I think this could be good for the listeners to get, because I do believe we all have angels working with us, and I truly, the older I get, I mean, I'm still fairly young, but I see when something's happening or something that I'm not happy about is happening, I I'm really working hard at taking a step back now, and I know I'm still human, so I'm still going to have, a reaction to something that's terrible or a change, but now I'm trying to take a step back first and saying, okay, this must be making room for something. Something is shifting. So when you mention that, these pieces that they're working with to lead you in a direction, right?
Hmm.
Is that kind of what it is? Like, is that the little life changes that happen, these things that happen are shifting us to get us to a destination?
Yes. And I've got a really good example.
Okay.
So in 2017, I started midwifery college because I don't know, all the pieces of my life and all of the trainings I'd gone through that felt random for so long all came together in midwifery, like phlebotomy and CNA and herbs and yoga. And it was just like I had all of these trainings in all these different directions, but midwifery kind of encompasses all of that stuff. And so I thought, oh, I finally figured it out. 2017, right? No. Life happened after 2 semesters. I had to leave. I had to finish raising my kids, had to, whatever. I end up with an opportunity last year to go back to midwifery college. And 2 months in, I lose my funding. And so I got to leave again. And I'm like, I am 0 for 2 with this. I guess I'm not supposed to follow this route. And so I just, when I left for the second time, I was like, done. I'm not ever going to, I mean, I'm going to be 50 next month. And I was just like, I, I don't have any more time to waste right now, right? Because time is kind of a human construct I've got to think about. And so, yeah, I was completely done. Well, that was last June when I left. And by November, okay, so in March, I had had the one experience of hanging out with the angels and them telling me to be patient. Got into school in May and June, left in June, and in July had another experience hanging out with the angels, telling me, here's all the moving pieces, be patient. Well, so November comes around, and a girl that I had gone to school with for that 2 months called me up and she said, I'm working at a birth center. It's high volume. They're looking for another student. You got to get in here. And I'm like, I'm not a student anymore. And she said, no, you can go through the PEP program, which is a program where you have to learn and self study all of the academic stuff, but you go and learn by doing. It's like an old fashioned apprenticeship.
Oh, wow.
And I wouldn't have known that or had this experience available to
Mhm.
me if I hadn't gone to school for that 2 months and met her, right?
Right.
So I mean, so you're seeing all these switchbacks of the way the
And
angels are working.
not to say this, but it almost sounds like that was a better route to doing the work, right?
Yes.
So
Yes,
that's
because I don't want
yeah,
to pay $50,000 to go to school at 50 years old. You
right,
know, I
right.
don't think
And
I wanted to do that at 30 years old, but I would
yeah,
have.
right. Yeah, and that, I mean, that's what's interesting though, is that that's what I mean by when those moments come up, it's so easy to react out of, maybe an anger reaction, or I'm done, like, and
Disappointed. Yeah,
disappointed. I also feel, and I could, I don't know for sure. I just believe we all have free will on how we take action and react to things. And um I don't believe we are just puppets on a string, uh and everything's just going to work itself out correctly. I think that it will work in a direction as long as we're staying aware. And I only say it like because I think to moments in my life where I probably reacted a wrong way, and I still got to the destination I wanted to get to, but it took longer.
yeah,
Like I had to learn another lesson in order to get there. Or so I think it's crucial that, as we progress in our own journeys, that we really try to get in touch with learning to move through this world a little more with a little more ease and not react so quickly. Does that make sense?
absolutely does. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, absolutely. Because, yeah, humans, we want to react to things. That's the ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is really the whole purpose of this life is trying to, you know, when we're born, we are these beings of love. We come into this world and the only thing that we know is love. And then the world gets on us and we wear the world and what it's taught us and what it's hurt us and then there comes a point in life, sometimes it takes like a tragedy or some big event to get somebody to turn it around, or like me, a bunch of little events that add up, to finally like make us connect to, I need to turn this around, I need to come back to this space of love. and and yeah, for me that actually happened in another very sacred experience with angels. um,
Please
I
share.
I had gone to bed one night, um, and this is my favorite story because it literally is the thing that I constantly come back to. Whenever there's frustration in my life, whenever I dip back into that grief over the loss of people in my life, this is the thing that brings me back. Um, I had gone to bed this night and I was already in a layer of dream. So I'm coming to realize that I don't know if everybody does this, but I can dream in layers. Okay, so I can go from a dream into a deeper dream and then come back, like be woken up and come into this layer of dream. Does that make sense?
I think so. So there's different, like, as you get deeper into your dreams, you change layers.
Kind of, yeah. So I had been dreaming, having some dream. I think it was about my kids and their dad, and I am woken up from a text on my phone that took me into a higher level of dream, which was the theta layer of consciousness for me.
Hmm.
It wasn't my actual phone, it was a dream phone. Okay. But it wakes me up and I read this text message and it says, "Go say I'm ready to report." And it gives me the name of an angel. Um, I have since been told in this area I'm not allowed to say the name of the angel. I used to tell the story and tell his name, and I'm instructed stop doing that. So go say I'm ready to report. So in this layer of dream, I get up out of bed, I go out into the living room, that's not my actual living room. I walk across the floor, I sit in this chair, and I put my fingers in a mudra, and I close my eyes and I say, I'm ready to report. And I call this angel by name. And all of a sudden, I am just like in space. And you know, hyperspace in Star Wars when the stars are streaking past, and it's like these lines of stars. That's kind of what I'm in the center of, is this tunnel of light. And it's like this really beautiful golden light. It's not white and stark like Star Wars.
Right.
It's soft, it's comforting. It almost has kind of a pinkish hue to it. And I know in that very moment, I am in the center of God's love. And I am just completely encompassed by it.
Hmm.
And then here's my soul starts weeping again. And I am just exchanging my love back. I'm just, whatever source is to somebody, call it God, call it the universe, whatever that higher power is for your listeners. That's what I was in the center. And I'm just in this really deep love exchange. And I I don't realize at the time, but the angel is talking to me. It's trying to tell me things. But I'm just kind of like really enthralled in what's happening. And all of a sudden I see the ether kind of way out in the distance, split open. And I see these bodies of light. They're not paying any attention to me at all. Um, and I think I realize now that that was to take my focus out of what I was experiencing so that I could get a message, right? So I'm looking at these bodies of light, and that's when I acknowledge, oh, this angel is trying to talk to me. I better listen up. And um, and I don't know if I just can't understand the language or what's happening, but I'm not getting the words. Like I can't understand them for some reason. I think again, this is the vibrational thing. I needed to raise my vibration to be able to communicate here.
Oh, okay.
So I have a very lucid thought in that moment, like, okay, you just need to get the bottom line. What's the ultimate message here? And all of a sudden, I connect, be love. And I'm like, okay. So the message is be love. And I was still in that relationship with the man that had bipolar disorder at the time. And so as soon as I connected with the message of be love, all of a sudden everything kind of dissipated and showed me him. And my soul kind of knew that I needed to always be a source of love to him. And and I believe that that is why when it was time to finally leave that relationship as it was, I could do it with love, because I had that experience. Because I mean, I had these, it was a divine instruction to say I'm ready to report, to go get the message of be love, to be a source of love to this man. And um and it was just like less than a year later, I split up with him. I had a lot of just drama in my family because of it. Things got very hard, but I had this experience that just like held me the whole time,
Hmm.
right? It was almost like I've heard other people's near death experiences being that sitting in the tunnel of light,
Absolutely.
being completely encompassed by love. And I have since just been in absolute awe of the fact that I was invited into that space. I didn't have to nearly die to be there.
I was going to say that many experiences I've read about. I mean, I've read thousands. Before I took on this journey of doing a podcast, um, I've read and talked to many people who've had experiences, and that realm, the realm of the, whether you call it you're in the middle of the galaxy, whatever it is always explained that it's almost more, it's almost makes the galaxy pictures we have look not as good. It's different. It's more in depth from what I'm told. Um, but yeah, a lot of those people had to almost pass away, just to experience that. So yeah, you're one of the lucky ones that were able to, jump into that experience. To me, the feeling I got right away was a comforting feeling, as even if things are times are tough, remember this type feeling. This is what you are, at your core, like to not, you know, be so hard on yourself, or we're so hard on ourselves in this life. It's this I don't like to say it's not easy, because I do believe in the law of attraction too, and I think we can bring in more ease to our lives, but we all know it's a journey, and there's times where we think, what were we thinking? Like what? And I think a lot of us are here on a victory lap to bring light to the world. I do believe that. I think I've been here a few times. I just have this strong feeling, this strong sense. And what's that?
Me too.
Yeah. And you've probably been able to, having that experience. Okay, I'm going to ask something about that experience and the other experience, because I really wanted to get this from you. Um, when and because I'm just going to ask you the same way I would ask someone who I'm talking to that has had an NDE. And the question I would ask you is, you know, how real was that experience in comparison to you and I right now?
Absolutely. A- Absolutely real. Um, at least just as real as this.
Okay.
When I leave, so the I don't record all of my dreams. I only ever record the ones that feel like they're significant, right? And it's usually the ones like that I call experiences. Um, Even though my body is in a dream state, my soul has an experience. And the way I decipher the difference is that when I come out of a dream, details fade and they fade fast. When I come out of an experience, I wear that experience for sometimes years, and the details never fade.
Right.
So yeah, I can absolutely
I
like
like that.
right now, I can put myself back into that tunnel of love and I feel it so deep.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's not a love that is often felt in this
Real.
real world, right?
Right. Right. I
It
had I had someone tell me that if that were the case, we'd explode. It was because the feeling was beyond our comprehension. Like the love is different than this. It's, not to put our love down, but this is a, um
fighting the ego right now. Like
right.
our humanness has to we have ego, and
Hmm.
the ego's it's not a bad thing. It helps us. It keeps us safe. It sorts information for us, but um, but it's a distraction from
Hmm.
what this actual love is.
Right.
Um, I think that that's been my biggest lesson in this life. I can look back on my whole life and I can see where every major lesson of my life had to do with love, even if it started out with the lack of love. It always came around to teach me some kind of compartmentalized piece of the love puzzle that I was supposed to put together for my life.
Right.
And ultimately led me into experiencing source love. And, you know, I, now that I've had that experience, I don't know how to love any other way.
Mm.
I don't love my pet any less than I love a stranger. I don't love my neighbors any more or less than my parents. You know what I mean? It's it's an all-encompassing love now for me.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is what my ultimate journey is in this life, is to be love,
Right.
to be love and
Yeah.
teach it, you know.
I do sometimes wonder if that's why a lot of near death experiencers come back and they separate from the person they're with. I think, and what I mean is, I'm not saying to everybody that if they've had an NDE to go separate with their loved one, but I think, if you haven't found the right kind of love and you come back and it doesn't even, it's hard enough to probably find that kind of love, but if it's really on the other side of the spectrum, it's probably very difficult to stay with that individual.
Yeah.
And I can see why, if especially if you've experienced something that you didn't know existed, and now you're back and you're trying to, and I feel for people who've had those experiences, because it must be very difficult to readjust to this world in a way.
But
Um,
like you said, making space for something new, right?
right.
Um, Sometimes those doors have to close so that another one can open. And, just like my midwifery experience, I had to go to college for 2 months and waste $3,000 for that semester
Yeah.
in order for me to just meet one person that was going to set me up. So, you know,
Right. No,
it just,
that's interesting. I mean, that you went through that, and you said that it felt very real, and you can decipher the difference between just a regular dream and that experience. That's what I wanted to kind of touch on, because when you think of dreams, you think of sometimes your mind just putting a bunch of thoughts together and creating this experience while we're sleeping. But I don't even know if we totally understand dreams, because there's so much significance to people who've had dreams, and it becomes a very spiritual experience. Like, where is that moment of change? Or, I've always wondered about that. But
I have my
you,
theories.
yeah, yeah. And you have your feeling too. Like you said, you can go right back to where it was, and it feels
Yeah.
just as real as this. And some people even tell me it felt more real. And they're like, I can't explain that to you, but it felt more real than even this. And so I try to understand that. But again, I haven't experienced that. I've had some experiences though, but um yeah. So I would assume at this point, the other question I was going to ask besides that one was if you have a fear of death in any way at this point of the physical life of this life. Not that you want to go anytime, I'm sure, but it's I'm wondering if for people, I generally ask this question because a lot of people have that fear. And if there's any words of advice you can give to anyone, is there anything what would you say if someone had a fear of death?
I would say I'm not here to change anybody's mind. If they're having those fears, it's for a reason. It's because they need to work through something. Um, I would be more likely to just hold that space for them and ask questions. What are you afraid of? Where do you think it stems from? Um, you know, I don't know. Maybe they saw a movie when they were young and it just put something in there that they don't even remember, but it instilled some kind of fear. And so I think the point is to ask questions and to be able to work through those. But I mean, if somebody wants to take my story, they can absolutely borrow it. And I'm here to tell you, angels are real. You're never alone. And so when somebody goes through the death process, there's a whole army of people, beings, um, ready and waiting to hug us up when
Yeah.
we pass through.
One remarkable thing that I've been told numerous times, whether it's friends that have told me these stories or other people, but that when they were around a loved one that was passing, a frequent and common experience, especially with elderly, and they're still kind of here and they're kind of out and in and out, and they start kind of yelling, "Will you quiet it down?" or what is going on? And they start seeing people in the room, or they start looking in the corner and they see, and I've been told this so many times, and it's always people have passed. It's always not always. I mean, I just from what I've been told, it seems to be they start naming all these people who were long past,
Mm-hmm.
and I go, you know, what is that? There's something to that, and then there's even doctors that have said that, that they've witnessed that, or nurses, and of course, some of them say it's hallucinations and stuff, but there becomes a point where you go, well, I don't know, because this comes up a lot, right? And like, as soon as you just said that, the army waiting for you, it's like, yeah, the angels are around, right? And some of them might not even be from this life. There's probably angels and that we don't recognize here, but over there, maybe we recognize. I hear that a
Right.
lot too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
And loving ancestors. I've been visited by ancestors too.
wow.
Um, you know, and people who I never knew in this life, but I recognized them in my dream state um, as loving ancestors, loving people that my soul knew. So
When you met these angels, did you feel a recognition in any way, or was this a brand like was there any kind of recognition, or the feeling was recognized, or were you
when
confused?
I wasn't confused. And I think that's part of it too. Is it's like when you're in that moment, your soul knows. You know, when my room lit up and I saw a bunch of balls of light in my room, I knew exactly what I was looking at. There
Okay.
wasn't a question in my mind. It was just like, boom, here we are. You know,
Mm,
it wasn't a bunch of bodies
right.
of spirits standing in my room. I can't say honestly if that wouldn't freak me out. So maybe that's why they appeared as little orbs of light, was
Right.
because if you know you got 20 beings standing in your room, that might be a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
more concerning. Um, but yeah, it was just peaceful and loving, and I knew exactly. I was just, oh my gosh, I have angels.
Wow.
And then to feel the hands on my head, and that's happened one other time too, where I'd asked a question in the dream state and felt the hands on my head. And I guess that's a form of communication between us. Is if I ask a yes or no question, they'll nod my head if the answer's yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is pretty remarkable. That's amazing. That's amazing. Hopefully I won't be walking around nodding my head all the time if I'm in touch with my angels. But all jokes aside, it's amazing to hear your experience. It's amazing to hear you say that, when that moment happened, there was a clarity of, oh yes, these are my angels. Like there wasn't a you weren't in fear and you were ready to run. And it's again, it's a similar vibe when I hear people say they've passed and they all of a sudden are above their body, or they're in this other realm or the tunnel, and they go, oh yeah, oh okay, yeah, I know where I'm going, I remember this, or yeah, okay, this is familiar, I'm going to do this now. There's no like, oh my god, how, the fear is gone. It's a natural feeling, similar in a way to what you're saying, that you just knew right away, okay, here are my angels. you know
Back to your, this is what's happening.
yeah.
When I got the text message on my phone that said, go say I'm ready to report, my soul knew that was a divine instruction. Get up and go do it. You know, I didn't
Wow.
question it. I just knew there was an angel telling me to go do something. So I did.
I love that. That's unbelievable. Where can people find info on what you do? Is there like, do you have, I believe you have a website, or I wonder if you can give us a little more info on how people can get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you with the work you do.
My business is called Earthside Holistic. Um, so earthsideholistic.com. I'm Earthside Holistic on Facebook, Instagram. I have a TikTok. I don't do much with it. I have a YouTube. I haven't done much with it. But you can find me out there.
And that's Earthside Holistic. Perfect. All right. Last question I ask
Yeah.
everybody.
Okay.
The first thing that comes to you, you can get into this with whatever way you want to, but the first feeling you have when I ask the question, why are we here?
We're here to learn love. And there's a recipe, and I teach it. Um, we're here to learn love. And it's kind of like I said before, we got to get through the ego because we are born as these little tiny balls of love. And as life goes on, it teaches us other things, and we need to get through that. Um, I had an experience where again, it was in this altered state. The lesson, the message there was that the only The only emotion that comes from spirit is love. Everything else is ego, including purpose and meaning.
Mm.
And when I heard that in the moment, I was very frustrated with that information, because to me it was like, well, there's no purpose and meaning without the ego. What's the point? What's the point of being here? And it wasn't until months later I came to understand these human bodies need the ego as much as we need food and water. It's when we get stuck there. When we get stuck in ego, whether it's pride, entitlement, depression, anxiety, um, I don't know, whatever, any of those kinds of things, that's the ego. We're stuck.
Mm.
When we have anxiety, when we have depression, those are literally like our souls throwing up red flags saying, please deal with me and bring me back to a state of love, because love is, it is our homeostasis. It is where we belong. It is, it's the core of who we are. And if you're dealing with somebody like just say you're dealing with somebody hard in your life, you're not getting along with somebody, one of the first ways to get to that point is to just show mercy, because you can still be angry and have mercy at the same time. But when you have mercy, it leaves you open to feeling compassion for that person and why they are the way they are. This came in handy with bipolar disorder, right?
Right.
I
Right.
had mercy, even though I was angry and upset, and there was a lot of pain that went along with that relationship. Um, I I opened it up to mercy, and then I had compassion for who he was and where he came from and what he was dealing with. And then I was able to actually forgive. And when you truly forgive another person, it's not just like, I forgive you, go live your life, I forgive you, everything's fine. That's dismissal. Forgiveness comes back to soul. It comes back to spirit. It comes back to a space of love. Once you can forgive somebody and come in that space of love, that's source love. That's like you're not affected by any of the garbage anymore. And
Right.
I think that's where we're all being asked to go.
Wow. I love that answer. And you went into an area of something I speak with a lot, which is forgiveness. I think it's really important. I
Oh,
think it's
yeah.
an area that a lot of us can easily fall into a trap of anger and resentment and jealousy, whatever it is. But forgiveness is this area that needs to be worked on. I totally agree. I've never had someone talk about that idea of forgiveness. The message of love is very common. What
Yeah.
was that? Sorry.
I could talk another hour about that.
Yeah, I bet. Maybe we'll have you back. Maybe we'll have you back, and we can do an episode on forgiveness. But I do want to say thank you for coming on to the episode. This has been a great conversation. Most of these conversations I have are great, and they go in the direction. And I feel like I do let is if I want to get really down that rabbit hole a little bit, but I feel like I let spirit guide me with the questions, and that's why I
Love it.
try not to overthink it beforehand. But I think you brought a lot of light and shed a lot of light on a lot of things. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I always take a moment and say thank you to all the listeners. Please like, share, and subscribe so that we can get these messages out to people to continue to help heal the world and bring kind messages to your soul. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time on Soul Inspired. So